The wind tore through the Colorado Rockies like it wanted to bury everything in white. It was the night of the 27th of February 2025, and Dr. Marcus Reed, 48 years old, head veterinarian at Rocky Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary, had just finished his last check on the enclosures when the emergency radio crackled. "Marcus, it's Ryan Thompson. I've got a lioness out here, heavily pregnant, caught in an old snare. Legs bad, she's struggling bad. Storm's closing in fast. I need help now." Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed his kit, climbed into the rescue truck, and drove straight into the blizzard. Headlights barely cut through the snow. Ryan met him at the edge of a frozen ravine. There she was, Sky, a beautiful lioness, tawny coat, matted with ice-swollen belly, heaving one front leg trapped in rusted metal. Her golden eyes locked on Marcus, wide with pain, but too weak to fight. "Easy, girl," Marcus said, quietly kneeling in the knee-deep snow. With numb fingers, he worked the jaws of the trap open. Sky let out a low, exhausted rumble, but didn't lash out. When the metal finally released, she collapsed. Marcus wrapped her in blankets, loaded her carefully into the carrier, and they fought their way back to the sanctuary through whiteout conditions. Inside the heated exam room, the team moved fast, fluids, warmth monitors beeping. Sky's contractions started almost immediately. By the time the first grey light of February 28th reached the windows, 3 tiny cubs lay against her side, Blaze, Luna, and the smallest one they would later call Nova. Marcus leaned in to check their heartbeats. The first 2 were strong, steady. Then he placed the stethoscope on Nova. He froze. 2 distinct rhythms, one fast and light, the other deeper, slower, both coming from the same fragile chest. His hand trembled slightly. He listened again, certain he was mistaken. He wasn't. Marcus drew back slowly, face pale, staring at the tiny cub whose silver-flecked fur caught the light in a way that felt impossible. "Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me right now, what time is it where you are, and what city are you watching from? I want to know how far this story has traveled to reach you. Hit that like button if you're already hooked, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and turn on notifications. The wild still has more to show us." By the time the first grey light of February 28th reached the sanctuary windows, the team had Sky stable on the padded table. Ryan Thompson stood in the doorway, still wearing his snow-crusted coat, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Emily had pushed into them earlier. He watched the monitors beep in steady rhythm and spoke low, recounting the night for the record. "I found her just after midnight," Ryan said. "She was down in that narrow drawer off County Road 17, half buried already. The snare was old, probably left by poachers years back. Jaw clamped clean through the muscle above her wrist. She didn't even try to bite when I got close, just looked at me like she knew she was done fighting." Marcus nodded without looking up from the IV line he was adjusting. He had already cleaned the wound, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped it in fresh gauze. Sky's breathing had evened out under the warmth of the overhead lamps. The 3 cubs, 2 males and 1 female, nuzzled against her flank, tiny paws kneading blindly for milk. Blaze and Luna were active from the start, mewling softly and squirming for position. The smallest one stayed quieter, pressed close to Sky's chest. Emily Harper stepped in beside Marcus, her scrubs still dotted with snowmelt. At 34, she had been at Rocky Ridge for 6 years, long enough to read an animal's mood before the numbers on a screen confirmed it. She dried her hands on a towel and leaned closer to the litter. "These 2 are strong feeders already," she said, nodding toward Blaze and Luna. "But this little one..." She reached in carefully and lifted the 3rd cub just enough to check its color and reflexes. The cub did not protest, did not cry out, its eyes unusually alert, for a newborn tracked her hand with slow precision before closing again. "She's quiet. Too quiet. And look, her eyes opened when I touched her. That's not normal for a few days yet." Marcus set the stethoscope aside and took the cub from Emily. He cradled it against his chest, feeling the small body rise and fall. The double rhythm he had heard earlier was still there, faint but unmistakable under his palm. He kept his expression neutral. "Let's get weights and vitals logged first. We'll run a full panel on all three, once Sky's stable enough for us to move her." The morning passed in controlled routine. They transferred Sky to the large maternity enclosure lined with fresh straw and heat pads. She settled immediately, pulling the cubs close with a low, rumbling purr that vibrated through the glass. Ryan stayed long enough to sign the incident report, then headed back out to check the roads. "Call if you need anything," he said at the door. "That storm dropped 2 feet in places. I'll plow what I can." By noon, Sky was nursing steadily. Blaze and Luna latched on with greedy determination, their small tails flicking in rhythm. The third, cub Nova, Emily suggested after watching her for an hour, nursed more slowly, almost deliberately. Every so often, Sky would shift her weight and draw Nova tighter against her side, as though shielding her from something only she could sense. Emily stayed through the afternoon shift, monitoring oxygen levels and temperature. She kept glancing at the isolation chart Marcus had started for Nova. "You think it's just hypothermia stress?" she asked once, when they were alone in the lab. Marcus shook his head. "No. The vitals are steady now. It's something else." He tapped the preliminary blood draw results on the screen. White cell count normal, glucose, good. But the genetic snapshot flagged an anomaly, segments that did not match standard Lion reference data. "I've seen markers like this once before. Old conservation project, shut down over a decade ago." Emily crossed her arms. "You worked on it?" "Briefly." Marcus kept his voice even. "Thought we were helping endangered populations recover faster. Turns out nature doesn't always appreciate shortcuts." They fell silent for a moment, watching the enclosure feed on the monitor. Sky had rolled onto her side, exposing her belly fully. Nova lay curled in the curve of her mother's foreleg, eyes half open again, staring straight at the camera lens, as though she knew they were watching. Emily exhaled slowly. "Whatever it is, she's not like the others. And Sky knows it." Marcus did not answer right away. He simply watched the screen, the small silver-flecked cub, breathing in perfect time with the mother who had risked everything to bring her into the world. March first brought the first real look under the microscope. Marcus carried the small vial labeled N3 into the lab at 7:15. Emily was already there, calibrating the sequencer. She glanced up when he set the sample down. "Blood from Nova?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "And a fresh one from Sky for comparison. Run the standard panel first, then the marker screen." Emily loaded the samples without another word. The machine hummed to life, pulling data across the screen in steady waves. They watched in silence as the baseline results populated: hemoglobin, normal, platelets good, no signs of infection. Sky's profile matched every healthy adult lion in the database. Nova's did not. The genetic overlay flagged 12 anomalies, short sequences that aligned with archived conservation data from a project Marcus had not opened in 10 years. He leaned closer, scrolling through the matches. The code was familiar accelerated cellular repair markers, designed to boost resilience in captive-bred populations. The program had been shut down after ethical reviews found the long-term effects unpredictable. Marcus had been a junior researcher, then convinced the work could save species on the brink. He closed the file and rubbed his temples. "It's not contamination," he said quietly. "The sequences are integrated." Emily crossed her arms. "You're saying she carries fragments from that old initiative?" "Not fragments. They're expressed. Look at the expression profile. Those markers are active." He pointed to the heat map. Red spikes showed elevated activity in Nova's sample areas that should have been dormant or absent. They moved to the enclosure feed. Sky lay on her side, the cubs tucked against her. Blaze and Luna wrestled weakly, paws batting at each other. Nova remained still, head resting on Sky's foreleg. Every few minutes, Sky shifted, pulling Nova closer with deliberate care, tucking her under her chin as if to shield her from the overhead light. When Emily adjusted the camera angle, Sky's ears flicked back, and she gave a low, warning rumble that vibrated through the speakers. "She's never done that with the others," Emily noted. Blaze bumped her paw earlier, and she just licked him. Nova moves an inch, and Sky tenses. Marcus watched the screen for a long minute. She senses something different. Instinct, maybe. Or more. He returned to the lab bench and drew a second sample from Nova. This time, a tiny drop from the ear vein. Under the scope, the cells looked normal at first glance, but when he switched to fluorescence, the nuclei glowed faintly in irregular pulses. The rhythm matched the double heartbeat he had charted the night before. "Marcus," Emily said from the doorway. Sky just stood up. "She won't let us near the cubs for vitals." He followed her to the observation window. Sky was on her feet, now positioned squarely between the litter and the access panel. Her tail lashed once, then stilled. Nova stayed pressed to her side, small chest rising in perfect sync with Sky's larger one. When Marcus stepped closer to the glass, Sky lowered her head and fixed him with a steady golden stare, not aggressive, but unwavering. Emily touched his arm. "She's not letting us separate them. We try to check Nova alone, she'll stress." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Then, we don't separate them. We monitor from here for now. Increase the remote cameras and log every interaction." They spent the afternoon adjusting feeds and running cross-references. The old project files buried under layers of encryption confirmed what Marcus already suspected. The markers were from Phase 2, maternal imprint enhancement intended to strengthen bonds in reintroduction programs. It had never progressed beyond simulations. Someone, somewhere, had taken it further. By evening, Sky had settled again, but her posture remained protective. Nova nursed briefly, then lifted her head and looked directly at the nearest camera. The movement was slow, almost intentional. Marcus felt the hair on his arms rise. Emily noticed too. That wasn't random. "No," Marcus said, "it wasn't." He shut down the sequencer and locked the samples in the secure fridge. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the metal roof. Inside the enclosure, Sky curled tighter around her litter. Nova nestled deepest safe in the curve of her mother's body. On March 5th, Nova did something no newborn should be able to do. The sanctuary was quiet in the late afternoon, the kind of stillness that follows days of constant monitoring. Marcus sat at the observation desk, reviewing overnight footage when the live feed caught his attention. Nova, barely a week old, had separated herself slightly from the litter. She moved across the straw in a straight line, deliberate, unhurried, toward the low-water dish placed near the edge of the enclosure. Her steps were steady, paws placed with precision that made Marcus pause the playback. He leaned forward. Nova reached the dish, lowered her head and drank. Not a clumsy lap like Blaze or Luna, who splashed and stumbled. Nova drank cleanly, then turned and walked back to Sky in the same direct path. The silver flecks in her eyes caught the light for 2 full seconds before she continued. Marcus replayed the clip 3 times. "Emily," he called, without raising his voice. Emily appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. She watched the screen over his shoulder. "That's not instinct. That's intention." Marcus rubbed his jaw. "She heard her name yesterday when I said it during the check. Today, she responds to the camera like she knows we're watching." Emily pulled up a chair. "We've had cubs track movement before, but this is different. She's choosing where to look." And the path she avoided the uneven straw completely. No wobble, no detour. They switched to real time. Nova settled beside her, but when Marcus spoke softly into the intercom, "Nova," over here the cub's ears swiveled. She rose, crossed the enclosure again, and stopped directly below the speaker. Her gaze fixed upward. Emily exhaled. That's targeted response. She's associating the voice with direction. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his chest. "We can't let this go public yet." If word gets out, we'll have every researcher and agency knocking. Keep the enclosure locked. Limit access to us only. No visitors, no tours." Emily nodded. "Agreed. But Sky's starting to look off. Her energy's dropping. She's still nursing all three, but she's lying down more. When Nova moves away, Sky follows immediately like she can't let her out of reach." They checked Sky's vitals through the remote sensors. Heart rate slightly elevated, temperature normal but trending lower. Marcus adjusted the heat lamps while Emily prepared a nutritional supplement. Sky accepted the bottle without resistance, but her movements were slower, her eyes half-lidded, even as she licked Nova's head, repeatedly grooming the silver-flecked fur with careful insistence. That evening, Nova repeated the water trip twice more, each time pausing to look at the camera. The third time, she lifted a paw and placed it against the glass partition, small pads pressing flat, holding for several seconds before withdrawing. Marcus stood at the window, arms folded. "She's testing boundaries, or communicating." Emily joined him. "We need to document everything privately. If this is tied to those markers, we're looking at something beyond standard variation." Sky shifted again, drawing Nova back under her foreleg. The lioness's tongue moved in slow circles over Nova's neck and shoulders, the motion almost rhythmic. Nova remained still, accepting the attention, while Blaze and Luna played nearby without interruption. Marcus turned away from the glass. "We increase the observation logs, every movement, every vocalization, and we run another blood draw tomorrow, compare expression levels." Emily hesitated. "Marcus, if Sky keeps weakening, we may have to intervene. Supplement feeding for the cubs, maybe separate nursing sessions." "Not yet," he said. "Sky's still fighting to keep them close, especially Nova. Let her lead for now." They worked late, logging data and cross-checking the old project notes. The maternal imprint protocol had theorized enhanced bonding in modified offspring, but no live trials had ever confirmed it. Marcus closed the files and looked back at the enclosure. Sky had curled fully around the litter, Nova tucked deepest, the mother's steady breathing, lifting the small body in time with her own. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of coyotes across the ridge. Inside, the sanctuary lights dimmed to night mode, leaving only the soft glow over the maternity pen. The evening of March 9th changed everything when the phone rang. Marcus was alone in the lab, reviewing the latest overnight logs, when the desk line lit up with an unfamiliar area code. He answered on the second ring. "Dr. Reed, Victor Lang. We worked together on the Resilience Initiative. You remember?" Marcus's grip tightened on the receiver. Victor Lang, 55, now former project director, had not contacted him in over a decade. The voice was calm, almost collegial. "I remember," Marcus said evenly. "What do you want, Victor?" "Straight to the point." "Good. I've seen the satellite pings from your sanctuary, unusual vitals on one of your recent rescues, a lioness litter with one outlier. I'd like to arrange transfer of that specimen for further study. Non-invasive, of course. We can discuss funding substantial support for Rocky Ridge." Marcus glanced toward the enclosure feed. Sky was resting, Nova curled tightly against her side. "There's no specimen here. Just a mother and 3 cubs. They stay." Lang's tone stayed level. "Marcus, you know what those markers mean. This isn't a natural variation. The old protocols." "The protocols were shut down for a reason," Marcus cut in. "Ethical Review Board federal oversight. It's over. Don't call this line again." He hung up before Lang could respond. The silence in the lab felt heavier. Marcus locked the phone in the drawer and walked to the observation window. Sky had risen slightly, ears forward, as though she had sensed the tension through the glass. Emily arrived for the night shift 10 minutes later. She noticed Marcus's expression immediately. "Everything okay, old colleague," he said. "Trying to reopen a closed file. We need to tighten security. No external access to the feeds, encrypt the logs." Emily nodded and pulled up the camera controls. "Nova's been active again." She circled the enclosure twice this afternoon, always stopping at the same spot near the access hatch. They watched the playback. Nova moved with the same measured steps, pausing to press her paw against the lower latch mechanism. The hatch was secured with a magnetic lock, but the cub lingered there, head tilted as if listening for something. Marcus frowned. "That's new." Before Emily could reply, the feed flickered. One of the secondary cameras in the maternity pen showed movement. Nova had slipped through a narrow gap where the heat pad met the wall partition. The gap was barely 3 inches, meant for air circulation, yet the cub had wedged herself through and was now in the narrow service corridor behind the enclosure. Emily moved first. "She's out. I'll grab the carrier." Marcus hit the emergency override, unlocking the corridor door. They entered quietly. Nova sat calmly, in the dim light, looking up at them, without alarm. When Marcus crouched, she stepped forward and brushed her head against his gloved hand. Once brief contact, then she turned back toward the enclosure. Emily opened the carrier door. Nova walked inside without hesitation, settling on the blanket as though it were routine. They returned her to Sky in under 2 minutes. Sky reacted the instant the hatch closed. She rose to her full height, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest, not directed at Marcus or Emily, but at the space where Nova had been. The sound vibrated through the floor. Sky crossed the enclosure in 3 strides, nosed Nova, roughly then pulled her close, with both forelegs enveloping the cub completely. The growl softened to a steady rumble as Sky licked Nova's face and neck in long, insistent strokes. Emily exhaled. She knew. She felt Nova was gone even before we brought her back. Marcus watched the monitor. Sky's breathing had quickened during the separation, now slowing as Nova nestled deeper. Blaze and Luna stirred briefly but stayed on the periphery, while Sky kept Nova pinned under her chin-tongue, never stopping its methodical grooming. Marcus stepped back. "We reinforced the partition tonight, double-check every seam, and we log this as a containment breach, internal only." Emily adjusted the camera angle to capture Sky's face. "She's tiring faster. The extra effort to shield Nova is showing." Her vitals dipped again during that growl. Marcus nodded. "We'll increase the nutritional drip tomorrow, but we don't separate them unless it's critical. Sky's bond is what's keeping her going." They worked in silence for the next hour, securing the enclosure and updating the security protocols. Nova remained quiet, under Sky's whole small chest, rising in time with her mother's. The growl had faded, completely replaced by the soft, continuous rumble of contentment or warning. Outside, the sanctuary lights dimmed for the night cycle. Inside the maternity pen, Sky stayed awake, eyes half open, watching the shadows beyond the glass, while her tongue continued its slow circles over Nova's fur. March 13th arrived with the second major storm rolling in from the north. By midday, the sky had turned slate gray, wind driving snow sideways against the sanctuary buildings. Power flickered once at 3:17, then held. Marcus and Emily moved between the generator room and the maternity enclosure, checking connections and fuel levels. Sky had been restless since dawn, pacing short circles before settling back with the cubs. Nova stayed closest, body aligned perfectly with Sky's ribcage. At 4:22, the lights dimmed for good. The backup generator kicked in with a low rumble, but the surge protectors tripped half the circuits. The maternity pen plunged into red emergency glow. Monitors dropped offline for 40 seconds before rebooting. When the screens came back, Nova and Sky were breathing in perfect unison, inhale for inhale, exhale for exhale, visible on the thermal feed as one continuous waveform. Marcus watched the pattern stabilize. "They're sinking." "It's not coincidence." Emily adjusted the oxygen feed. Sky's rate was erratic this morning. Now it's steady, matching Nova's exactly. Sky lay on her side, eyes half closed, but her foreleg remained draped over Nova like an anchor. The cub's small chest rose and fell in lockstep with the Lioness's larger one. Blaze and Luna huddled nearby unaffected, while Sky's energy seemed to flow visibly. Her coat duller, movements slower, yet Nova's silver flecks appeared brighter under the red light limbs, stronger head held higher. Marcus knelt at the glass. She's giving something. Strength, maybe, or more. The storm peaked at 6:08. Wind tore at the roof, vents snow piling against the windows in drifts. Victor Lang's black SUV appeared on the security camera at 6:41, tires spinning before finding traction in the plowed drive. He stepped out in a heavy coat, hood up, and walked straight to the main entrance. Marcus met him at the door. "Dr. Reed," Lang said, voice raised over the howl. "I tried calling. No answer. I drove through this to talk in person." Marcus blocked the doorway. "You're not coming in. The animals are in lockdown. Storm protocol." Lang glanced past him toward the corridor leading to the maternity wing. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to confirm what we both know is happening. That cub Nova, right, carries markers from the initiative. Let me see her. They're a family. They stay together. You leave now, or I call Fish and Wildlife." Lang stepped closer, snow melting off his boots onto the mat. "Marcus, you're sitting on something groundbreaking. The maternal transfer we theorized. It's real here. Sky's adapting to Nova's condition. If we document it properly, we're not documenting anything for you," Marcus said. "The initiative ended because it crossed lines. You were the one who pushed those lines. You were part of it too. Don't pretend your hands are clean." Marcus held his ground. "My hands are clean now. Get back in your vehicle. Roads are closing in 20 minutes. Lang stared at him for a long beat, then turned and walked back to the SUV. The taillights disappeared into the whiteout. Marcus locked the door and returned to the observation room. Emily was at the monitors. Sky's vitals dropped during the argument. She stood up when Lang's voice carried through the vents. Now she's down again, but Nova's readings are climbing, heart rate, strong temperature, up 2 degrees. Marcus watched the feed. Sky had pulled Nova fully underneath her body, curled in a tight shield. The Lioness's breathing remained synced, each cycle shallower than the last. Yet Nova's small form looked more robust, silver streaks vivid, even in the dim light. Blaze and Luna pressed close, but Sky's focus stayed on Nova tongue, occasionally reaching out to groom the cub's ears in slow, deliberate passes. Marcus adjusted the heater output. "She's transferring whatever she has left. We keep the enclosure stable. No more visitors." "No exceptions," Emily nodded. "If the power holds, we'll make it through the night. But Sky's reserves are low. She's not eating, barely drinking. They stayed through the storm's peak, monitoring every fluctuation. Sky never fully relaxed her body, a living barrier around Nova." The cub responded in kind, pressing closer, small paws, kneading against Sky's side, as though returning the effort. By 9:30, the wind eased slightly. The generator hummed steady. Sky's eyes remained open, fixed on the glass, while Nova slept deeply, breathing strong, and even against her mother's chest. As the storm cleared on March 16th, the sanctuary felt quieter than ever. Sunlight broke through the clouds in thin shafts, melting snow from the roof edges in steady drips. Marcus stood at the observation window watching Sky. The lioness had risen early, walking slow circles around the enclosure before settling back with the cubs. Her coat looked less dull, her steps steadier. Nova pressed against her side, small body alert, silver flecks catching the new light. Blaze and Luna wrestled nearby, tumbling over each other, while Sky kept one paw draped over Nova, grooming her in short, careful passes. Emily joined Marcus with 2 fresh coffees. Her vitals are climbing. Heart rate steady, temperature normal. Whatever Nova gave back during the storm, it's working. Marcus nodded. She's rebounding. Nova too. Look at her head up, eyes tracking movement. She's gaining strength faster than the others. They reviewed the overnight data together. Sky's readings had bottomed out at the storm's peak, then reversed course in the early hours of the 15th. Nova's metrics mirrored the shift: respiration, deeper activity levels higher. The The sync between them had loosened slightly, no longer a perfect lockstep, but a gentle overlap that seemed to sustain both. Marcus set his mug down. "We can't keep them in here much longer. Sky's ready to move. The cubs are mobile enough. We prepare for release." Emily looked at him. "You're sure? The sanctuary's secure, but the wild is what they need," Marcus said. "Sky's instincts are intact. Nova's bond with her is what pulled them through. If we hold on too long, we risk weakening that." They spent the morning planning. Marcus mapped the release site, a protected valley 10 miles north, part of the federal wildlife corridor. Emily coordinated transport crates and veterinary clearance. Sky watched them through the glass ears forward as though she understood the shift. By afternoon, Sky was eating solid food again, chunks of meat placed near the enclosure door. Nova stayed close, occasionally nudging her mother's flank. When Marcus entered to check the crates, Sky rose but did not growl. She simply positioned herself between him and the cub's gaze steady. Marcus spoke low. "We're getting you home, girl. All of you." Sky blinked once, then returned to Nova, licking the cub's ears in slow circles. The next day, Marcus filed the incident report with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He attached the security footage of Victor Lang's SUV, the audio from their conversation at the door, and a summary of Lang's prior calls demanding access to Nova. The report cited unauthorized attempt to obtain protected wildlife for research without permits. 2 days later, the response came. An investigator from the service contacted Marcus directly. "We've opened a case on Victor Lang. Your documentation is solid. He violated federal regulations under the Endangered Species Act and Lacey Act provisions. We're pursuing civil penalties and license revocation." Marcus kept the details private from the staff, but Emily saw the email when he forwarded it for records. "They're moving fast," she said. "They have to," Marcus replied. Lang crossed into criminal territory when he showed up unannounced during a storm. The service doesn't tolerate that. The investigation concluded swiftly. On March 28th, the final notice arrived. Victor Lang was fined $250,000 for attempting to acquire wildlife specimens without authorization, and for misrepresentation of research credentials. His federal research license was revoked permanently, no appeals granted. The service cited clear intent to circumvent ethical and legal safeguards established after the 2015 initiative closure. Marcus read the notice twice, then filed it away. He did not feel satisfaction, only relief that the line had been held. Sky continued to improve. By early April, she paced the full enclosure without fatigue, Nova matching her stride. Blaze and Luna followed in playful bursts. Marcus scheduled the release for April 10th, a clear morning with no forecast threats. The transport went smoothly. Sky entered the crate with minimal coaxing, Nova slipping in beside her without hesitation. The drive north took 2 hours. At the release site, a wide meadow bordered by pine and open range, Marcus opened the crates manually. Sky stepped out first, nose to the ground, scenting the air. Nova followed immediately, pressing against her mother's leg. Blaze and Luna tumbled out, last blinking in the sunlight. Sky looked back once at Marcus and Emily standing 50 yards away, then turned toward the trees. Nova stayed at her side, silver fur gleaming. The family moved together, disappearing into the pines without pause. Marcus watched until the last tail vanished. Emily stood beside him, arms folded. "They're home," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "They always were. We just had to let them go." The meadow was silent, except for the wind through the grass. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a low rumble answered. Sky's voice carrying across the valley, strong and certain. 2 months later, on a calm April morning in 2025, the sanctuary gates opened for the last time. Marcus drove the transport trailer himself, Emily riding shotgun with the monitoring tablet. The road north wound through pine stands, still dusted with the last patches of winter snow. Sky rode quietly in the lead crate, Nova beside her, Blaze and Luna in the second. No sedation. Marcus had decided they needed to feel every mile of the way home. At the release meadow he parked at the edge of the clearing. The air smelled of damp earth and new growth. Emily opened the rear doors first. Skye stepped out slowly, nose to the ground, testing the scent. Nova followed without hesitation, pressing close to her mother's flank. Blaze and Luna bounded out next, tumbling into the grass before circling back to the group. Skye lifted her head, ears swiveling toward the trees. She took one step, then another, the cubs matching her pace in a loose formation. Nova stayed at her shoulder, silver fur bright against the tawny coat. They moved deeper into the meadow, pausing once to scent a fallen log, then continuing toward the tree line. Marcus and Emily watched from 50 yards back. Skye glanced over her shoulder once, golden eyes meeting Marcus's. For a long second, then turned fully away. The family slipped into the pines without pause, tails flicking, bodies blending with the dappled light. They waited another hour, listening. A low rumble carried back through the trees, Skye's voice answered faintly by Nova's higher tone. The sound faded, swallowed by the forest. Marcus exhaled. They're gone. Emily smiled faintly. They were never ours to keep. Back at the sanctuary that afternoon, a courier delivered the official letter from the National Wildlife Federation. Marcus opened it in the empty observation room. The citation named him recipient of the 2025 Conservation Leadership Award, recognized for exemplary protection of endangered species, ethical decision-making in crisis, and successful reintroduction of a high-risk litter. The award came with a grant for sanctuary upgrades, but Marcus set the check aside. The real recognition was the empty maternity pen straw, still warm from the family that had filled it. Emily found him there later. She leaned against the door frame. They're already tracking them on the corridor cameras. Trail cam caught them at the ridge yesterday, Skye leading Nova, scouting ahead, Blaze and Luna keeping up. They're hunting together. No signs of stress. Marcus nodded. Good, that's what we wanted. Emily stepped inside. Marcus, I've been thinking about what this whole thing meant, not just for Skye and the cubs. For us. He looked at her. She continued. We spend so much time trying to fix what's broken. Meds enclosures data, but sometimes the fix isn't control. It's release. Letting go when the animal shows you they're ready. Nova pulled Skye through because Skye trusted her. And Skye let them go because she knew the wild would take care of the rest. Marcus listened without interrupting. Emily turned toward the window, where the pines stood tall against the evening sky. This story isn't about a miracle cub or old experiments gone wrong. It's about what happens when we stop trying to own nature and start respecting it. Compassion isn't locking something safe, it's giving it the freedom to live on its own terms, even when that scares us. She paused, then spoke directly to the camera as though addressing every viewer who had followed the journey. If you've watched this far, you've seen what real rescue looks like. It's not the dramatic moments, it's the quiet choice to step back and let the wild take over. Skye taught us that strength comes from connection, not possession. Nova showed us that difference isn't something to fear, it's something to protect. And Marcus, he showed us that the hardest part of loving something is knowing when to say goodbye. She smiled softly. So, next time you see an animal in need, remember the greatest gift we can give isn't control, it's freedom. And sometimes that freedom comes with letting go. Marcus joined her at the window. The forest stretched dark and endless beyond the fence. Somewhere out there, a family moved under the stars, stronger together, unbound. Victor Lang's name appeared one final time in the news feed. 2 weeks later, the fine of $250,000 had been paid in full. His research credentials stripped permanently. No appeals, no second chances. The system had closed the loop. Marcus switched off the screen. He walked outside, the night air cool against his face. The sanctuary was silent except for the wind through the pines. He stood there a long time, listening to the quiet that followed release. Emily stepped beside him. You okay? He nodded. Better than okay. The meadow where they had opened the crates was empty now, grass already growing taller. Somewhere deeper in the valley, a lioness's voice rose low, steady, carrying across the ridges. It was answered by three smaller tones, blending into the night. Marcus smiled faintly. The wild had reclaimed its own. And in that perfect silence between the call and its echo, man and nature finally understood one another.